Hi family, welcome once again to this channel. I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe, share and like this video so that a lot of people can have the opportunity to see what we're sharing on this platform. Today I want to talk about a man who was also one of Jesus' favorites, and you know who I'm talking about. It's Peter. So Peter, after Jesus' crucifixion, him and his friends went back fishing, right? It's not wrong to go back fishing, but I want to tell you, and this is the core of the message that I'm going to be sharing today, that Peter not only went back to fishing, but he forgot his main assignment. And you know, like in this world, you and I do it. We get distracted, we forget, we get disappointed, things are not working out, and we feel like we are discouraged. I don't want to do it anymore. I feel like I'm a failure. I feel so bad. I regret. And that is exactly what happened to Peter. I've been thinking about this and really digging deeper to say, what does it mean to forget your assignment? And I want you to stay with me here because this is very important for your future, for your destiny, and for your purpose as well. The purpose that God has given you, has assigned you for in this life. Why do people forget their assignments? Why do people abandon their assignments? Why do people let go of their assignments? So I find that the first reason people get or forget their assignments is because of distractions. I want to share with you a very short story what happened with my daughter recently. So my daughter is 12 years old, and one day I asked her to say, "Oh baby, can you clean my bedroom please?" And of course she's like, "Yes mommy, I'm gonna go and clean your bedroom." So she went in my bedroom one afternoon after school, and 1 hour she's not yet back. An hour and a half she's still in my bedroom, and I'm like, and she's so quiet, and I'm like, what is she doing? What's going on? So I went there and peeped. I found her checking on our photo album, and she's looking at the pictures, and she's just so glued and interested and focused on looking at the picture. So I didn't say anything. She didn't even see that I was looking at her, or I was peeking inside the room. And I walked back to my workstation, and after maybe like 15 minutes, she comes back running, excited, and she's like, mommy, I found this picture. Can you come and see? Look at this. And I said, excuse me, but you went there to clean the bedroom, have you? No, I haven't started yet. And that was like 2 hours after. She got distracted from what she was taught to do just because something came along her way. And instead of focusing on the assignment, she started looking at other things else. And a couple of hours later, not just minutes, she hasn't still cleaned the bedroom, and she's distracted. Instead, she's coming excited after seeing something else, right? That's exactly what you and I do, that we know that God has sent us to do this in this world. We know what we're exactly supposed to be doing in each season of our life. But because something is going on in our life, or because something is going on outside our life, and we take interest in that, and we shift our focus from what God has for us to that distraction. And days later, months later, years later, we are still distracted. And that's how we forget our assignment. And distractions can come in different ways. They can be physical, they can be mental, they can be psychological, they can be external, but also they can be internal. And how you end up forgetting your assignment, how you know that you've forgotten your assignment, you can abandon it. You walk away from it. You neglect your assignment. All those come because you have forgotten your assignment. Those can all be results of you forgetting your assignment. And so I want to take you to John chapter 21. John chapter 21 talks about the breakfast at the sea. And this is after Jesus' crucifixion, his resurrection. This was the third time he was showing himself to his disciples. And so at this particular point, Peter and some of his friends, the disciples, they are by the lake. And Peter, as being Peter always, he is the first one to start things, and he's like, oh guys, I'm gonna go fishing. You know, the thing with Peter going back to fishing, why that is wrong in this context, is that it made him forget his assignment. Peter just didn't walk away from what Jesus called him to. I want you to remember that Peter was called out of fishing. And Jesus made it clear to say from today onwards, when Peter was called to his role or to his assignment, to his calling as a disciple, Jesus made it clear to say, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. So at this particular point, when Peter is deciding to say, I'm going to go back fishing, he is not only walking away from what he has been called to do, but he is walking back from where he was called. And this is why I'm saying I have a problem with this. You and I have been called for specific things in our life, to fulfill specific tasks in our life. And when God called us from our drunkenness, from our, adulterous life, from everything, that drug abuse, addictions, whatever life God has called us from, to say, I want to make you a fisher of men. I want to make you somebody who's going to serve me, who's going to spread my word, who's going to do this and fulfill this assignment in your life. You can never go back to that life anymore. It's so wrong for you to say, I'm abandoning this assignment. But it's extremely wrong for you to go back to a place where Jesus has taken you from. Because the thing with your calling, though, is that not only does it help you to live a fulfilled life, but it also protects you from things that are unnecessary, things that may be destructive to your life, things that will not only destroy your life, but also destroy your relationships that you have with Christ, but also with people here on earth. And so we are seeing in this chapter, Peter walking back, walking away from what he's been called, and walking back into the very same place Jesus called him from. And one of the reasons Peter is in this place is because he's thinking about all that has happened. He's thinking about how he neglected Jesus, how he rejected Jesus, right? How even after being warned before Jesus' death that you will reject me 3 times. And Peter was like, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Jesus, I love you so much. You've seen how I've acted. You see how I'm protective of you. You see how active I am as a disciple. You see what all those that I've done, Jesus. There's no way I can do that. And then, Peter, just before Jesus was crucified, he does the very same thing that Jesus warned him against. He does the very same mistake that Jesus warned him against. And now Peter is at this place where he feels really bad. I shouldn't have done that. And maybe he's accusing himself. He's feeling guilty. He's feeling bad. He's feeling worse as a disciple. And he feels like a failure. It's easy to walk away when you have been disappointed by someone else. But in this place, Peter has been disappointed by himself. He has disappointed himself, and so he feels like a failure. He feels so bad. He's wondering, how can I fix that? How can I fix this? I shouldn't have done that. Walking away becomes very, very convenient if you are gifted in other areas of your life. What do I mean? You see, Peter was a very experienced and excellent fisherman. So Peter was gifted in fishing. Peter was gifted in all these areas of his life. But even though he was gifted, even though he was an excellent fisherman, that's not what God had called him to do. That was not part of his purpose. That was not a place where he was supposed to be. Jesus called him for a specific assignment in his life, but because of his ability to be a good fisherman, he was like, oh, I can take some leisure time, or maybe this discipleship thing is not working for me. Let me go back to fishing because I'm good at it. I want to ask you today, are your gifts, the gifts and the talents that God gave you, are they a distraction to your calling and to your purpose? Because sometimes you will feel justified to walk away from your purpose to do something that is convenient for you, something that you're good at. Just because you've faced challenges in the area of your calling, it doesn't justify you to abandon it and go back to what you are gifted to. A lot of people think that, oh, because I'm gifted in this area, maybe I should stick with that. But maybe that area is not what God has called you in this season of your life. Okay? So, Peter, I just want to read the first verses of this chapter. And so we are on John chapter 21. It says, after these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And in this way, he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, you see, Simon Peter, I am going fishing. And they said to him, we are going with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. You know, Peter is at this point where he feels, oh, I'm gifted. I know this thing better. I know fishing better. I know what time of fishing is convenient. I know what time of fishing is appropriate. I know how to do this. I know how to cast the net. I know how to paddle the boat. I know how to do all these things, and I'm going to go fishing. And that is how sometimes we think as people. We might be here thinking about Peter and saying, oh my goodness, after spending all that time with Jesus, after all that experience, really, after seeing the miracles when he was called out of the fishing business into the people's, being the fisherman of men business, how could he go back? But here's the thing. Peter is stuck in patterns. Peter is stuck in patterns. He is stuck in his past. Even though he was taken away from that, his mind is still there. He still thinks about him as a fisherman. He hasn't really accepted the fact that that is gone. And that's what you and I do. Because I feel like I'm still a fisherman, I'm still skilled, I'm still good at it, I can go back and do whatever. But that's not what God had called him to do. What do you do when your calling is not working? What happens? What is your reaction when you feel like a failure in the area of your calling? Because this is the place where Peter is. This is where we find Peter, and he feels like, this is not working. Yes, you called me into this, but it's not working. What happens to you when you meet disappointments in your life? I want to take you to the example of Abraham. Abraham was called from the land of the Ur, or of the Chaldeans. And God said to him, I'm going to call you to a place where I'm going to show you. And so Abraham took off his family, his father, his brother, his brother's son, and everything that he had, and embarked on this journey. He knew without a shadow of doubt that God had called him to go into this direction, right? But along that way, he lost his father. Along that way, God kept promising him that I'm going to give you nations, yet he's still barren. Along that way, him and Lot have issues, big issues, to the point of separation, that they had to part ways. Along that way, he meets, kings that were very aggressive to him, and he had to go on a fight that he never prepared for. And so my question to you is, what do you do? How do you react when you have encountered challenges in the area of your calling? Because Peter is at this point where he feels challenged. He feels like a failure. He's filled with guilt, with shame, with so many things. And he's just like, I'm going to default to what I used to be. It was better there. It made sense there. I was a skilled fisherman there. I was good there. It felt comfortable there. I didn't have all these issues there. And that's what you and I do. Your gift and your talent can be a distraction to your calling. Okay? I wrote something here. It's easier to keep walking in your calling when someone has disappointed you. And you can easily point fingers at them. It's because they are haters, they do this. But when you have disappointed yourself and you don't have anyone to point fingers or to shift the blame on, everyone knows, the world knows that it's your fault. And this is in the area of your calling. It's very easy to walk away from that. And so we're seeing Peter here, who has defaulted to his past, because his past is his comfort zone. His past felt right. His past felt good. His past feels familiar. His past feels justifiable. His past feels appropriate. And so he resorted into going back into his past, yet that is the very same past Jesus had called him out of, to say, I'm calling you out of this into this ministry. But because he's disappointed, because he has disappointed himself, and he doesn't have anyone to shift the blame to, and he's filled with shame and guilt and everything else, he's like, I'm going to resort to going back to fishing. Comfort zones are not always bad places. Your past, the past that God has called you from, might not be a bad place at all. Maybe you were singing in a choir and God called you to say, no, I don't want you to sing in the choir. I want you to preach. Your past might not be a bad place at all. But because that's the place of your comfort, and you keep on defaulting back to it. But Jesus said, no, Peter. I called you out of that already. Peter wasn't committing any sin by going back to fishing, because fishing wasn't sinful at all. It's different when God has called you out of an addiction, when God has called you out of, theft, when God has called you out of anything, any kind of criminal act that you were addicted to, pornography, whatsoever. It's different. In this case, Peter wasn't committing any crime. It's just that is not what God had intended him. That wasn't his assignment. And so he was called out of that into this assignment. And so I want you to take note that your comfort zone or your place of your past is not always a bad place, but they are not the right place. They can be a distraction to your destiny. They may feel good, but they will sabotage your calling. How many believers today know that God has called me to continue to do this work? You heard God. You heard God that God said I should be doing this thing, but yet you keep defaulting to what's familiar. You keep going back to what feels comfortable. You keep going back to what feels right. One thing that I'm noticing is that Peter was not fully convicted at the first call. And I'll tell you the reason. When God has called you to say, I am calling you out of this because I want you to do this, you don't keep those relationships. You don't keep those connections. Whatever connects you to that past, you're supposed to break it. You see, Peter was in this place where he knew that he was called. But guess what? He kept the boats. He kept the fishing nets. He stayed by the seashore, the sea area. He never moved to anywhere. He was still in the same environment. Environment matters a lot to your calling. You cannot fully execute or live in your calling while you're connected to what was in your past. You can never fully commit to your calling while still keeping those relationships. You cannot be called out of pornography and you still have the links to those websites. You cannot be called out of robbery and you still have the weapons that you use to go out to rob people in places. You cannot be called out of adultery, yet you want to still keep connections and phone numbers and, relationships with those people. You can still be part of that gang that God has called you out of, and you want to, at the same time, walk into your calling. It's not going to happen. You need to destroy completely those things because you are a new creation, because you are walking in your purpose now. The problem is that a lot of us, we want to keep plan B. And usually our plan B is our place where the very same place that we've been called from. And we want to keep those places because we are like, what if this fails? What if this is not working? What if I get disappointed? What if? And we want to go back there out of convenience, not out of conviction. And so we will sell our place of calling in the place of survival, in replace of survival. So it's like, I can't survive here. I feel like this is not working and I'm not making enough money here. My family needs to survive, and you will default back there because that made sense to you. That made you more money than the place where God has called you. So Peter defaulted to his past. He didn't just abandon the calling. He went back to the place where God had called him from. So Jesus in his mercy says, Peter, listen, I called you already out of this. Why are you going back? And look, it's been the whole night and you haven't caught any fish yet. And so Jesus wants to restore Peter. And Jesus wants to repeat the assignment to Peter so that he gets it. You know, there's so many Christians today who will not get things once. We don't get it the first time. We don't get it. We need God to keep on repeating the same thing over and over and over again before we get it. And so Jesus shows his mercies to Peter and says, don't worry, I'm going to restore you. I will recall you. I will repeat what happened, because what I said before, because I want you to get it. And this is what happens. I just want to read that passage where Jesus restores Peter to his calling. The title in my Bible, it says Jesus restores Peter. But really, when I think about it, I'm like, restores him to where? To what? And I realize that Jesus is restoring Peter to his calling. He's like, Peter, no, you're getting distracted right now. Peter, no. This is not what I said you should be doing. I said you will be fishers of men, not fishermen of fish, you know. And so I'm going to restore you to that purpose, to that calling. And so Peter is being given a second chance here. I wonder how many times you have been given, how many chances you have been given in your calling. Some of you, you know, every day you can't sleep at night because you know what God said about you. You know what God commanded you to do. You know exactly how the assignment looks like. But because you're so much afraid, because you don't know how it's going to go, because you haven't gotten the whole vision yet. Maybe you're like Abraham, where God just said, I'm going to show you where to go. And you haven't gotten the whole map yet. And maybe you have all these doubts because that is something totally new. Maybe you're like Noah, that God told to say, I want you to make an ark. Yet, he had never seen any rain. And because you don't know what's going to happen in the future, you still doubt. And God keeps calling you, and you can testify, you can tell that this is God calling me. Maybe you tried to go back to what you used to be, and it's no longer working. It's no longer working. You're feeling like, what is going on here? I'm so used to doing this, but this is not working anymore. Maybe you're like Peter, you devoted to fishing, and you dive in the water and you can't catch any fish. And you're like, what's going on? I'm a skilled fisherman. I know this. I know how to do this. What's going on? I want you to know that maybe that is a sign that God is calling you back into your calling, and he's giving you a second chance. So let's just read a couple of verses there. So when they had eaten breakfast, so Jesus made breakfast for his disciples. Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than this? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him again, tend my sheep. And then he said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. So I just want you to reflect on this scenario here, because it's a very interesting scenario. Every time I read this, I'm like, okay, Jesus has got this sense of humor. And Peter is having a deja vu moment here. It's like things in his past are repeating themselves again, right? But what is so interesting is that Jesus is calling Peter 3 times. And that is That is something that is, I'm sure, is playing in Peter's mind to say, okay, I denied Jesus Christ 3 times, right? And now Jesus is calling me again into this and asking me this question 3 times again, you know? And Peter, we hear this, that Peter is getting a little upset with Jesus to say, why are you just repeating? The Bible, this version says that Peter was grieved, right? Peter was grieved. But I think Peter was annoyed. That's the honest truth. Like, okay, Jesus, like, how else do you want me to say this? Like, I've answered you twice and you keep repeating the same questions. What's up? You know? There is something that I wanted to mention here, that, you know, the thing about abandoning your calling is that you're also breaking a relationship with the one who has called you. So by Peter defaulting into his past or previous life, he was breaking a relationship that he had with Jesus. It's like, you have called me, but I don't really, resonate with this calling. It's not working for me. I'm going to go back to what I used to be. You are definitely automatically breaking a relationship. And so Peter broke his relationship with Jesus at this particular point. The other thing is that when you abandon your calling, you're also abandoning the principles upon which the assignment is built. So if your calling has been built on certain principles, right? The moment you abandon the calling and you have forgotten your calling and you have defaulted, or you've gone your own different way, you have violated the principles upon which this calling has been built. Okay? The other thing also about abandoning your calling is that you are breaking the commitment between you and the one who called you. And so Peter, by defaulting to fishing, right, he was breaking the commitment that he had made with Christ, with Jesus, to say, when he called him to say, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. He should have said right away to say, I don't want it. I don't want to be committed. But because he followed Jesus all these years until crucifixion, and he wants to go back, it means he is breaking the commitment between him and Jesus. And so that's the most dangerous part about you abandoning your calling, or you forgetting your calling. You're not only forgetting the calling or abandoning it, but you're breaking the commitment, you're violating the principles upon which that calling has been built, and you're breaking the relationship between you and the one who has called you. Okay? And so Jesus now comes back to restore that which was broken between him and Peter, between Peter and his commitment to his calling. And Jesus wants to restore that. He wants to restore that relationship. He wants to reinstate Peter's position back again into his calling. And so one of the things that I noted is that restoration requires recommitment. Peter was committed, but that was in the past. Now he's broken that commitment and he has to recommit. No wonder Jesus keeps on calling Peter and repeating the same questions, because Jesus wants to make it clear that Peter is committed now, that Peter means it, that Peter is not being superficial anymore. This is serious. Right? This is deep. We're going to go deep here. And Jesus wants to make sure. And so he's calling Peter 3 times. Right? Restoration. Amplify your grief, your shame, and your regret, even your anger feelings. Trust me, Peter at this point, Jesus is trying to restore him, and he's asking the same questions. It's aggravating him. It's making him upset. It's making him annoyed. Maybe it's making him feeling ashamed. Because to be honest, if you have broken your promises and you've defaulted to your past, it makes you feel ashamed somehow. It makes you feel frustrated about yourself and your choices. It makes you question your decision-making processes. It makes you question certain things in your life. And so we are seeing Peter in the same state that he's getting a little annoyed with Jesus asking him the same questions. But I want you to know that restoration, the process of restoration, is the process of reinstating or restoring trust that has been broken. And that cannot be easily happen, right? The other thing that I wanted to share with you is that reestablishment of your relationship with the one who has called you to the assignment requires a certain level of commitment, especially if this is the second, or if this is the second time you have to go back, right? And so Peter needed to understand that this process of being reestablished, being restored, it will require something more than just a yes. It will require something more than just saying, okay, I will follow you. Okay, I will do it. It needed some level of commitment that is deeper than just a yes. Okay? And so we are seeing Jesus, calling Peter by his first name and by his first and surname, by his father's name rather. It was like Simon Peter, son of Jonah. Simon Peter, son of Jonah. Simon Peter, son of Jonah. And I was like, why is Jesus doing that? Why did Jesus say Peter? Why did Jesus say Simon? Why did he have to say Simon Peter, son of Jonah? And I realized that, your calling is beyond who you are. Your calling is beyond your worldly identity. Your calling, whoever you identify yourself with, whatever it is that you identify yourself, you have to know that God wants to call you out of that previous identity, because he wants to give you a new identity. And this is the reason Jesus was calling Simon Peter by his father's name. He's reminding Peter of his calling and telling him to say, your calling goes beyond this identity of yours. You have to rise above this identity if you want to do my work. Some of us are so attached to our families, our family values, and maybe your calling is something that will violate your family values. And Jesus is just reminding Peter to say, yes, I know you are the son of Jonah. Yes, you are Simon Peter, but what I'm calling you to is greater than your name, is greater than your identity, is greater than anything that you've known in your life. And so today I just wanted to remind somebody. Today I just wanted to encourage somebody. Today I just wanted to help you that no matter how far you've wandered from your assignment, from your calling, you heard from God. You know that this is what God has called you to. You know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. But maybe because of some struggles that you've been through, maybe because of the situation that you're in, maybe because you got distracted and you're feeling ashamed, you're feeling guilt, you're afraid, you don't know where to start from. I've got good news for you, because Jesus is still calling you into that calling. Jesus is still calling you back into the assignment, and he won't stop until you say yes, and you say yes with everything that is inside of you. Until you say yes and you mean it. Until you say yes and you jump back into action. Until you say yes and never go back to where you have been. Until you say yes and you break everything that connects you to your past. I'm so grateful because Jesus ended his calling or his conversation with Peter by telling Peter to say, follow me once again. He repeated this because he said this when he first called Peter. And that is how the conversation was concluded back then. And right now he's repeating the same. Jesus will never change. His calling upon you will never change. It will be the same. And he wants you to say yes. And Jesus concludes this conversation again by telling Peter to say, follow me. It's very funny that when you read the few more verses in that chapter, you will hear again Peter being distracted, asking about, how about that? How about that, disciples? What about that? And Jesus said, Simon, I'm calling you to be focused on what you've been called. That is not your business. Never mind that. Just follow me. And Jesus keeps on repeating. I think Peter is one of those people who is just distracted because there's so much running in his head. It's just at this moment that Jesus is calling him back. And it's the very same moment that he's getting distracted and getting into other people's business that doesn't even concern him. But Jesus, in his mercies, still goes back to Peter and tells him to say, hey, Peter, shut up. Just follow me. Just follow me. That's all you have to do. Don't worry about anyone else around you. Don't worry about who is doing what. Don't worry about this person and that person. Don't be distracted. All that I want you to do is follow me. And so today, I hope this message helps you. I hope this message makes you think about your calling and your assignment and all the things that God has called you to, that you have abandoned, that you have neglected, that you have rejected, that you have walked away from and defaulted into who you used to be. And I pray that God will help you. God will help you today to get back on track, not to get distracted like Peter, to be fully committed and to give this assignment your 100%. May God bless you.